with a single pilot aeroplane privilege, most likely the single engine piston land class, without any type variant extension. If you wish to fly another model than the one you graduated in, you must complete the training previously described. As you forget, your skill as a pilot will decline. Because of this, certain privileges must be reactivated after some time. The principle applies that the fact that you regularly must demonstrate competence will force you to actively keep all your competence in a state of readiness. Reactivating a rating is called revalidation. All ratings are valid for 1 year except for the single engine class rating, single engine piston as well as single engine turbine. The rating is valid for 2 years. To revalidate a privilege, you must pass a proficiency check. A proficiency check is a flight where you demonstrate to an examiner basically the same exercises that are contained in a skill test. A proficiency check can be completed within 90 days of expiry of the rating, but must be completed before the expiry of the rating. The new validity period is always counted from the end of the previous period if the check is passed within these limits. For the single-engine piston land class, a special revalidation process exists that permits an alternative to the proficiency check. Instead, you may revalidate on the basis of recent experience. If you, within the final 12 months of the validity period, have flown 12 hours of flight time, of which at least 6 hours are as pilot in command, and you have performed 12 takeoff and landings, you can revalidate by flying 1 additional hour with a flight instructor. In this manner, you'll have the opportunity not to fly a check ride, but instead to learn new things as part of your revalidation. If you fly a proficiency check as part of a revalidation of a different rating, you can have this proficiency check replace the 1 hour flight with a flight instructor. The 13th hour may be flown anytime inside the 2-year validity period, and the deadline will always remain the same if you choose this method. Should you forget to revalidate a rating, you'll always have the opportunity to reacquire it. The process is called renewal and is by principle composed of some training followed by a proficiency check. The longer a rating has been overdue, the more training you'll be required to take. For a class or type rating, you are allowed to exceed the deadline by 3 months, though without training being required, but only a proficiency check must be passed. The duration of a flight is measured in several ways, depending on what the purpose of the time interval is. You'll probably encounter the following flight time terms: tachometer time or tacho time, block time, and airborne time. Tacho time is a measure of how many revolutions a piston engine have been running. You'll read the tacho time on the RPM indicator, where it is presented just as the odometer of a car. Normally the tacho timer is calibrated at 2,400 RPMs, which means that if the engine runs at 2,400 RPMs for 60 minutes, the tachometer will register 1 hour. If the engine runs at 1,200 RPMs for 60 minutes, the tachometer will only register half an hour. Often tacho time is used to measure engine wear, since it is proportional to the actual running time. For the same reason, aircrafts are often rented by the tacho hour. Block time is the time the pilot logs in the logbook. In the old days, it was measured from the wheel blocks were removed from the airplane wheels until they were again put around the wheels. The time between the blocks was the time in which the pilot had to pay attention to the aircraft control. Today, block time is defined as the time the airplane moves under its own power for the purpose of flight, until it comes to a final rest after the flight is terminated. Since helicopter pilots have to pay attention to the flight controls before the helicopter lifts off, block time is defined differently from airplanes in that it is counted from the main rotor starts to turn until it again halts at the completion of the flight. Airborne time is simply the time from the aircraft lifts off from the runway until it lands again. This time is entered into airport logs of manned aerodromes as well as into the aircraft log. From time to time, you'll experience that representatives from the authority will show up at airfields and ask for your credentials. Each nation will perform these ramp inspections to ensure that pilots are able to present the required evidence proving that they have the privileges the intended or the executed flight requires. All this is performed to defend against imposters. Ramp inspectors will identify themselves by a blue ID card with a red stripe diagonally across. So, in general, you are required to prove that you are allowed to perform the flight you wish to carry through, though formally the requirement is that you're required to bring the following documents with you on flights. Your pilot license, where class and type ratings are listed. Your radio license, if it is not included in the pilot license. Your medical certificate, and your logbook, where type variants and flight trainings are listed. Some form of identity proof containing a photograph, for instance a passport or a driver's license. So here is the summary of the pilot chapter. You are not allowed to fly for money. You must be trained on the aircraft you fly. Aircrafts are divided into qualification groups. You must hold a medical certificate. There are requirements if you want to bring passengers. You're not allowed to fly under any condition unless you're qualified. Your PPL has no expiry, but your class or type rating does. You can revalidate the single-engine piston length in two different ways. You must prove your privileges by carrying appropriate personal documents.